could you trade for this point guard without having to include one of the big three? As we know, Bradley Beal has the no trade clause. He's got the massive contract that not a lot of teams would want. So you're either having to give up Devin Booker or Kevin Durant. Are you willing to do that?
All right, let's dive into the meat and potatoes of today's show. We're going to be talking about point guards. Ain't that right, James Jones? Point guards.
Well, I think the team could benefit from having a point guard. I believe the team could benefit from having backup forwards, backup centers. I still always go back to your best players on the floor. That's a narrative we'll hear a lot. A point guard, point guard, point guard, point guard, point guard, point guard. And I'm saying, sure, that's great. Who do you want? Like, who do you want? Like, who's available, given the way we're built? Who can fit with this group? Whose game seamlessly fits with this group? And when you put that player on the floor and you take the ball out of someone's hands, whose hands are you taking it out of? And who are you putting in that position? And so it's more than just a position, like a point guard or small forward. It's the actual player that you can get or you do have. And so if we had the point guard that would be the best fit for this group, we'd find them if available. So I don't think there's anything wrong. I don't run away from saying we could benefit from having a point guard. I just don't think that was the answer to a lot of our problems.
All right, well, let's talk about some of them. Gerald, you wrote a hefty article over at gophnx.com because we have had this conversation. Do they not need a point guard? I think we're all at least in agreement that they do need a backup point guard. But when it comes to a starting point guard, still we are in agreement that they don't need one necessarily. But the rest of the group, meaning all Suns fans, there are some that still think the Suns need a starting caliber point guard. So we went through, and by we I mean you, looked at all quote unquote traditional point guards, or point guards who are closer to a traditional point guard anyway within the league at this point. And we went through and figured out, could they work for the Suns? And is it realistic? And what would it take to get them?
Yeah.
But you have some disclaimers.
I do. So for the people that haven't seen the article yet or are not going to read it at all, I kind of categorized it. I went through every point guard who's currently under contract. So this does not include upcoming free agents for the most part. Mentioned a couple near the end there. But this was to look at, okay, trade-wise, can the Suns acquire a starting caliber point guard? And this point guard that they bring in has to check a lot of boxes. Like, they have to fit with the big three in terms of not being too undersized, because whoever this point guard is would be taking 6'4" Grayson Allen's place in the starting lineup. They have to be more of a traditional pass first point guard, because if you have a scoring point guard, you already have three high caliber scorers. I'm assuming if we're having this discussion that belongs in the early 2000s about getting a point guard, it's someone to facilitate, to set the table. So they need to be like a more traditional, true point guard. They need to be starting caliber, because we're not just going to get a point guard to put a worse player than Grayson in the starting lineup just because he can handle the ball and he's some 6'2" guard. And also, like, looking at salaries, could you trade for this point guard without having to include one of the big three? As we know, Bradley Beal has the no trade clause. He's got the massive contract that not a lot of teams would want. So you're either having to give up Devin Booker or Kevin Durant. Are you willing to do that for any of these guys that we're going to talk about? And can you actually trade for them if you go with Nurk and a pick, or Nasir Little and a pick? Because remember, they have all these restrictions as a second tax apron team. So those are the biggest disclaimers that I wanted to get through. We will talk about free agents coming up next week, start to look at, okay, who can the Suns add at different positions with only vet minimums at their disposal? But for now, I wanted to keep it two guys that are currently under contract, because more than likely the only avenues you have to improve are trades or vet minimums. So we're going to wipe out more than half the board of all those point guards that are under contract right now.
You got names you want? Gerald's here to tell you, nah, you don't.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah,
That's pretty much it.
It is.